So you just quote a 50 grand job and you build in a 20% margin. You win the work, deliver it, and the client's happy. But once you run the final numbers, you realize that you didn't actually make the 20% margin you thought you were going to make. You actually ended up making 8%, maybe 5%, or at worst, you made a loss. And you're sitting there thinking, where the hell did my margin go? If this happens to you job after job, then trust me, you're not alone. I'm Ahmed Qayyum, a chartered accountant and finance director for construction firms and founder of Blue Water Accountants. Now, we work with construction and trades businesses that are turning over between 500,000 to up to about 15 million pounds a year. And here's the thing that I see every single week. Construction businesses losing margin not because they deliver poor jobs, but because they price badly. So today I'm going to show you how to price construction jobs so you actually make the margins you need for your business. I'm going to cover the 5 pricing mistakes that kill your margin, the correct costing method, the markup versus margin formula, and this one mistake alone costs construction and trades businesses thousands of pounds, how to price for variations, and how to verify it's working. If you're tired of jobs that look profitable on paper but don't deliver in reality, then this video is for you. Let me show you how to fix it. Alright, so why does this keep happening to construction businesses? Why do you keep losing money on jobs? It's because construction pricing is genuinely complex, and most people learn by copying somebody else rather than using a proper system and looking at their own costs. Here's what I mean. You probably learned pricing from your mate Dave, who runs a similar business and makes 20% margin on every job. So you copy his pricing structure, the same percentages, the same approach. Except Dave's business is completely different to yours. He's got 2 guys on payroll, you got 5. He works from home and you've got a unit with rent and rates. He does mostly domestic jobs that turn around within a week or 2, whereas you're doing commercial projects that run on for months. His overheads are maybe 15% of revenue, whereas yours are more like 25%. But you're both adding the same markup to your jobs because that's what Dave does and it works for him. And here's the problem with that. What works for Dave's business doesn't work for yours. You've got different costs, different overheads, different risk profiles. So you end up pricing jobs on Dave's costs that look profitable on paper, but by the time you've accounted for your actual costs, the margin's gone. This is why you can't just copy someone else's pricing system. Now let me show you the 5 specific mistakes that kill your margin. First, guessing costs instead of tracking data. That job will maybe take 5 days, but did it actually, or did it take 6 or 7 days? If you're not tracking actuals, you're guessing, and guesswork costs you margins. Second, forgetting the hidden costs. Rework, admin time, site visits, callbacks, warranty work. These quietly eat away at a margin, maybe 5-7% of your profit. Third is mixing markup and margin. This is the expensive one, and I've seen this cost businesses thousands of pounds every year. And I'll go into this in a bit more detail shortly. Fourth, not pricing variations correctly. A client asks you for changes, you do the work, but you haven't priced it or agreed the additional costs. So you end up funding the changes out of your own profits. Fifth is using the same margins on every job. Smaller jobs need higher margins, whereas larger jobs can take lower margins. But most businesses use one flat rate and it doesn't always work. And here's why this matters. 1 underpriced job is manageable, but 5 at once, your entire business is under pressure. So before you scale, get pricing right first. So how do you build a quote that actually delivers the margin you're expecting? Every profitable quote has 3 components: direct costs, overheads, and profit margin. So direct costs are the costs that are specific to the job. That includes materials, labor, subcontractors, and plant hire. So how can you estimate these accurately? Well, for materials, you can actually get supplier quotes. Don't guess based on the last job because prices are constantly changing on a daily basis. For labor, you can use data from past jobs, or again, you can get quotes from your subcontractors. If you don't have the data, always build in a contingency of say about 10-15% or whatever you feel comfortable with. For subbies, get written quotes before you quote the client, and for equipment hire, always include buffer days because jobs rarely run to schedule. So if you're not tracking actual job costs, you'll be pricing blind. The second component is overheads. These are costs of running the business that include rents, insurance, software, admin, wages, vehicles, marketing. And here's what most business owners forget to include: their own wage or drawings. As a business owner, you are working on the business. That's not free. That's a real cost that needs to be included in your overhead calculation. Here's how to calculate your overhead rate. take your annual overheads, including your own wage, and divide them by your annual revenue target. So for example, if you've got £200,000 of overheads and you're targeting £1 million in revenue, that gives you a 20% overhead rate. That means you add 20% to every job to cover these costs. But here's where most people get caught out. The hidden overheads on top of your base running costs. The 2 hours you spend preparing for this specific quote, that's cost for this job. The site visit before you won it, rework, callbacks, warranty work, bad debt. These are all specific costs that are not in your annual overhead figure, and they add another 5 to 10% per job. If you forget these, then every job will cover your base running costs, but not the actual costs of winning and delivering that specific project. So you'll end up staying busy, but you won't make money. The third component is profit margin. After direct costs and overheads, you want to then add your profit margin, and this should be a realistic margin that you expect to make on the project after covering all your overhead costs. Now you've got your three components, but here's where most businesses lose thousands of pounds: the markup versus margin mistake. Okay, so this is the most expensive mistake in construction pricing. Markup and margin are not the same thing, and mixing them costs you thousands of pounds. Let me show you how. Most people think I want 20% margin means adding 20% to my costs. So if your costs are 10 grand and you add 20%, then you quote for 12 grand. But here's what actually happened. You made 2 grand profit on a 12 grand job. That 2 grand divided by 12 grand is 16.7% margin and not 20% margin. So you've just lost 3.3% in margin because you used the wrong formula. Now, one job that might not be so bad, but if you multiply that over 4 to 5 jobs over the year, then suddenly your margins have shrunk. So here's the right formula, and write this down. Total cost divided by 0.8 equals your quoted price. So if you want to make a 20% margin, then you divide your costs by 0.8. 10,000 divided by 0.8 gives you 12.5 grand. So you should have charged 12.5 grand if you wanted to make 20% margin on a 10 grand job and not 12 grand. So now you've got the formula for your 20% margin. Use that on every single quote. And if you want a different margin, say 15% or 25% or whatever, then you just change that number. So if you want a 15% margin, you divide it by 0.85. If you want a 25% margin, then divide by 0.75. Simple. This one formula will save you thousands every year. So if you're thinking, I'm not sure if my pricing has been correct, then trust me, you're not alone. Most construction business owners I work with have been pricing incorrectly for years without realizing it. So look, pricing is just one piece of the puzzle. I've created a construction finance health check that assesses your entire finance function across 5 critical areas. It looks at whether you're pricing jobs correctly, whether you're tracking actual costs with work in progress, whether you're forecasting cash flow properly, whether you're staying compliant with CIS and VAT, and whether you've got the right systems in place to scale. It takes 3 minutes to complete and it's completely free. You'll get an instant report showing you your score in each area and exactly what needs fixing first. The link's in the description below, but let me show you one of the biggest profit leaks, which is variations. Variations are where margins quietly disappear. The client changes something mid-project and you do it to keep things moving, but you haven't priced it properly or agreed the additional costs with the client. So you end up funding the changes out of your own profit. So how can you fix this? Well, first you price the additional work before you carry out the job, and you get the approval in writing and then do the work. Second, you use higher margins, 25 to 35%, because variations cost more per unit. Extra trips, admin waste, workflow disruption. Third, you invoice for variations separately and you track the costs separately. So you can compare your costs of your main job with your variations to see how profitable each one was. You're not being difficult, you're protecting your business. And clients respect clear pricing far more than a vague, we'll sort it out later. Okay, so you can now price a job using the formula that I shared, but here's what most people miss. If your costs overrun during delivery, your margin disappears straight away. Pricing is only half the battle. Tracking is the other half. This is where WIP reporting comes in, work in progress reporting. It compares what you estimated against what you're actually spending while the job is still running, not at the end when it's too late. So if labors are overrunning in week 2, you can fix it. If materials come in 15% higher than you quoted, then you can adjust it immediately, either chase the client for a variation or tighten up somewhere else. Without WIP, you only find out at the end when the money's already gone and there's nothing you can do about it. But here's the other benefit. WIP reveals patterns that help you price future jobs better. You start noticing bathrooms always take 20% longer than I estimate, or electrical work always has more material waste than I budget for. So now you're pricing based on actual data from your own jobs and not guesses or what Dave told you. And if you're interested in learning more about WIP, I've got a full video breaking down WIP reporting and how to set it up. The link's in the description below if you want the deep dive. So what actually changes when you get your pricing right? Right now, your pricing probably looks something like this. You've been told a competitor has quoted 45 grand for a job, so you go in at 43 grand to make sure you win it. You're hoping you'll make a decent margin, fingers crossed it all works out. 3 months later, you run the numbers, and where you were expecting a 20% margin, you end up making 6% or maybe less. With proper pricing, it's completely different. You break down the job, the direct costs are 35 grand, overheads at 20% add 7 grand, so total costs are 42 grand. You're aiming for a 20% margin, so you do the formula 42,000 divided by 0.8 equals 52,500. That's your quote. Client comes back and says our budget's 45 grand max. And here's the difference. You can either choose to accept the job at a very thin margin, or you can walk away. Not because you're being difficult, but because you know the numbers. You know that at 45 grand, you'd be making a 6 or 7% margin, or maybe less once the hidden costs come in. That's not a loss, that's smart business. You've just protected yourself from 3 months of work that would have kept you busy, but not made you any money. That's what proper pricing gives you. No more guesswork, no more hoping it works out, no more wondering where your margin went. Just predictable profit and a business that's actually sustainable. So that's how you price construction jobs, so you actually make the margins you quote for, not the margins you hope for, the margins you actually quote. Here's what you need to remember. Break down all the costs properly, add overheads, including the hidden ones, and especially your own salary or wage. Use the right formula, costs divided by 0.8 for 20% margin. Price in variations with higher margins because they cost more, and track everything with WIP so you know your pricing's working. Do this and you'll stop leaving thousands on the table every year. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know if I'm pricing my jobs correctly, then I'd recommend you take the Construction Finance Health Check. It's free, it takes 3 minutes, and it will show you exactly where the gaps are across your entire finance function. Not just on pricing, but on cash flow, job costing, CIS compliance, and whether you've got the systems that are going to help you to scale your business. The link's in the description below. Complete it, and if you're doing over 500 grand a year in turnover, I'll personally walk you through your results on a 30-minute call, and we'll look at your finance setup, and I'll tell you exactly what to prioritize and what to fix first. Stop guessing your pricing, stop hoping jobs will be profitable, stop wondering where your margin went. Get the formula right, track it properly, and build a business that actually makes you money, not just keeps you busy. If this was helpful, then hit subscribe. I've got more construction finance videos coming your way. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next ones.